having great leadership skills is important. And it also requires some ability to be able to develop your own personal traits. A lot of people say leaders have to be born, not made. And while that might be true partly because I believe, and it's been proven, that there are certain characteristics that you need to possess to be a good leader, but developing yourself personally can enable you to gain that self-awareness, to be true and develop those traits, right? We are taught things as we are raised. We are taught things through our experiences, and it does require a certain amount of reflection on who you want to be as a person that you need to bring to that leadership role. Hey everybody, welcome to Finding the Upside. Thank you so much for joining me today. I am live here in my studio, in my office, and I'm so happy that you're joining me today, whether you're listening as usual on any platform that you get your podcast, or if you're watching me on my YouTube channel and enjoying this first premiere episode from my studio office. Today, I want to talk about leadership. And you know that I have talked about this before. I have many episodes regarding leadership. It's a topic that's really important. And I know leadership doesn't always sound like a real sexy term, but it is something that is so important to entrepreneurship. And if you are either leading teams in a job or leading your team in the business that you own. The program that I have, the Scale Factor Formula, I've mentioned it before on the podcast, and I've gotten a lot of questions about it. And the Scale Factor Formula, as it's designed, identifies 5 key factors, which I call scale factors, that I have from my 30 years of experience working in corporations and then also building my own business alongside helping my clients build theirs. I've identified as themes that stop a company from scaling to the next level, to increasing the growth exponentially to get to the next level. Typically, these are factors that cause a company, a business to get stuck. And one of those scale factors is building and leading the team. You know, I talk a lot about this, and it's something that is really important to embrace and understand. And maybe you get it. I preach this all the time. Leaders are not chosen because they're great leaders. The way people become leaders, typically in a corporation or a corporate business environment, is they were good at their job and then they get promoted to lead a team. Now, that is an important factor, having knowledge of what it is that your team will be doing, right? So you've done your job well, you know the ropes, and you're promoted to that level to lead a team, doing some of the things that you did in your functional position. But that doesn't really give you the skills to be a leader, to be a good leader. And what's crazy, and I don't want to say all companies, because some do invest in making sure they give people the resources, whether that's training or a mentorship program, to build those leadership skills. But unfortunately, commonly, it's skipped. And then that person really struggles unless they embrace the fact that they're not doing the best they can in leading their team. They're not getting the results that they had hoped for. And that's a real important epiphany. But it also, that awareness is important, but it also requires somebody to actually say, I'm going to do something about it, which unfortunately isn't always the common go-to. The other way that people leading businesses get to that place is they start their own company. And I mean, I've walked that path for sure, but I also came from 20 years in management and developing those skills. And I will attest that in my early years, I struggled. I got promoted in the same way that I described. So think about that. People who own businesses, the other blind spot for them is they've never worked for anybody else many times. Either they've started their own business from the get-go, they jumped into a family business, that was kind of their path, which I support. But having great leadership skills is important, and it also requires some ability to be able to develop your own personal traits. A lot of people say leaders have to be born, not made. And while that might be true partly because I believe, and I've seen it, And it's been proven that there are certain characteristics that you need to possess to be a good leader. But developing yourself personally can enable you to gain that self-awareness, to be true and develop those traits, right? A lot of times we are taught things as we are raised. We are taught things through our experiences, and it does require a certain amount of reflection on who you want to be as a person that you need to bring to that leadership role. And here's the thing, a lot of people don't do that work and they don't really get great results. And they end up going, it's this person's fault or that person's fault, or I can't find good people. And that's why I'm not getting what I need out of my team. So that's kind of the introduction. I've gotten a lot of questions about the Scale Factor Formula program. And I also have gotten a lot of questions about where people can go to develop the leadership skills. I have something that I'm working on called the Leadership Lab, and that's a title that's in wet cement. It's not in dry cement yet, but it really is a deep dive and concentrated program that helps people develop leadership skills. I've been doing leadership training for my whole career. But in my own business, that's one of my signature programs. But I'm specifically developing this leadership lab to be a program that's comprehensive, that will enable people to get access to resource, knowledge building, trainings, coaching, all kinds of things that can help them develop and gain the insight needed to be able to upskill their leadership ability. So here's the two things I want to talk about regarding leadership today. And they are deeply related to the Scale Factor 5, which is building and leading the team. And the first one, and actually related to the first Scale Factor, ironically, is having vision. So one of the most important aspects of leadership is vision. And vision is the ability to see beyond your current situation and be able to visualize a future that is brighter, more prosperous for your company, for your team. So great leaders possess the skills to envision and have that vision, to describe it, illustrate it, and model it for their team. And that's the way they can inspire others and lead their teams to achieve those great things that are part of their vision. A great example of someone who possessed this vision, having vision, is Steve Jobs. Of course, his vision and ability to create innovative products like the iPhone, the iPod, iPad changed the world. And he visualized a world where technology could be simple, user-friendly, and transform the way we connect and communicate with one another. But here's the thing. Having a vision isn't enough. As I mentioned, you need to be able to communicate that in a clear and concise manner. And this is where the art of storytelling comes in. A great leader can take their vision and craft a compelling story that engages and inspires others to join them in the journey. And that's where we create an engaged team at Scale Factor 2. This is what makes great leaders different from average ones. Now, there are traits that are definitely correspond and need to be possessed by that leader in order to do that. That's the thing. But that is a critical piece to understand, that having that vision, seeing that future state of where you're going, almost like a roadmap, and then sharing that with others is so important, because that's what allows people to really dig in, engage, and join you in creating that. A lot of the things that I see frequently is that leaders have a vision, but it's all up here. And they haven't illustrated it. They haven't shared it in the clear, concise way. They haven't told the story that allows people to be inspired and then motivates people to want to join on that journey. That's really important to understand. So this piece is being able to execute. A leader must be able to execute on that vision. And this means having the right strategy, resources, and team that's aligned with that vision and committed to achieving it. Now, that's a big fluffy statement, but what that really means is everything I've just described. Being able to tell the story, articulate where you're going, will allow people, and the right people, to engage and be able to join you on that journey. Many times we have many people that look for the right hire, but they haven't shared the vision. They haven't shown where they're going. And so they wonder why they have kind of half-hearted efforts. And the easy example that I give all the time in a training is if I told you, let's everybody go move that table. That's all I said. You might do that. You might help me move the table. But if I said, everybody, we're going to move this table and we need to move it down the field. Say you're on a football field. Envision that. We need to move it all the way down the field, 100 yards. And we need to do it within a certain amount of time. Everybody has a clear understanding of what that goal is. Everybody can jump in and be charged by that, recharged by that. And the energy of that diving in because they know where they're going. It's very different than just giving directives of, let's move the table. You may or may not get people to want to do it. They may do it begrudgingly, and they might not really put their full effort in. But if they know where they're going, it's a whole different experience. The other analogy that I like to give is, if you are going somewhere in a car, don't you get clear directions where you're going? Yeah, you don't just get in the car and drive around and maybe get there. Maybe you do sometimes if you're just exploring. But again, think about the difference in those two scenarios. If I know where I'm going, I know how to get there, I know where I'm going, so I envision the end result, then I can engage in that and I can join that leader, my leader, on that journey. So think about that. That's really important to getting people committed to achieving that vision and joining you on that journey. So ending this topic, vision is one of the most important aspects of leadership, but having a vision alone isn't enough. Great leader has to be able to communicate, execute, and inspire others to turn that vision into reality. That's all on this topic. And now I want to hit my second topic on leadership, which is also related to building and leading a team, which is Scale Factor 5. This one is striking the right culture, building the right culture. Now, I have to say that there's a lot of noise about this, right? But it is key to building an engaged team as a leader. With all the current trends in the labor market, and this was always the case, but particularly now with all those current trends about all the changes that are happening and all the struggles and the kind of different landscape that we're in right now, it's even more important to have a team that feels connected, motivated, and engaged with the work that they're doing. Now, vision's a part of that for sure, part of creating that culture, but it's also very challenging to create a connected team in our current state, right? Some of us work remotely, still work remotely. We have always had those circumstances, by the way, even before these last couple of years. I always had teams that worked throughout the country, didn't work in my home office, and they either worked out of their home or they worked in a different satellite office from our corporate headquarters where I was located. That is absolutely the case in my own business, and many of my clients that I consult with, that is their scenario as well. So it's even more challenging currently to have a team that feels connected, that's motivated and engaged. But let's first take a look and talk about the current labor market and why it's so challenging. Now, I'm going to tell you first off that the last couple of years of the pandemic, and I talk about this a lot. If you follow me on social media, you will hear me talk about this. I've talked about it in this on this podcast in some of the episodes. The pandemic has really changed everything, and I don't want to get deep into that. You can go listen to another episode where I talked about, I think the last episode, I actually talked about some of the challenges in terms of finding the best workers in this current state, right? It's not really employer friendly at this stage. It's employees have been able to, because of some of the changes, kind of tip the demand in their favor, or tip the conditions in their favor, which, by the way, I think was a long time coming. I think businesses in general and companies in general kind of got away with some practices that were not best practice, and it's led us to kind of the challenges with workforce. Anyway, let's talk about current labor market and what they're looking for. Studies have shown that millennials and Gen Z employees, which is the biggest part of the current workforce. We do have Gen Xers as well, and millennials and Gen X sometimes get looped together, but Gen X is the higher end of millennials, meaning the older millennials, Gen Xers. They're in between baby boomers and millennials, and I happen to be one of them. Millennials and Gen Z employees who make up the most of the current workforce are looking for more than a paycheck. I would argue that most people always were. But current conditions are demanding that, are creating that demand that employers need to respond to. These groups want a sense of purpose and a strong company culture. According to a survey done by Deloitte, 80% of millennials believe that having a sense of purpose is the reason to choose to work for a specific company. They want to work for a company that aligns with their values, and they want to feel like they're making a difference. I can absolutely attest to this in some of the things that I have seen in recruiting talent, helping my clients recruit talent. And the companies that are responding to this are thriving and having a much easier time of finding the staff that they're looking for, the talent they're looking for, and retaining that talent. So as a leader, how can you build an engaged team that provides a sense of purpose and makes your employees feel valued? It's kind of simple, right? In terms of striking that. People want to feel valued. How do you do that? And one way, and the most important way, the place to start, is to focus on creating a strong company culture. So here's the thing. That means having a clear vision and a mission for your company that aligns with your employees' values. And it also means creating an environment where your employees feel safe to speak up, share their ideas, and collaborate with each other. Now, this is not new. I think people always longed for that, but it was kind of poo-pooed to have that in a full, holistic way in a company. You know, it means making people feel safe. Like traditional business would poo-poo that because there's certain things we don't do and talk about. That is not going to create the best result. And I know firsthand that creating a safe space for people to be able to speak up, say they made a mistake, say they're struggling, or they have an idea and they want to contribute in a different way, or they have an idea and they want it to be considered. That is so important in creating that environment that those two groups, and really everyone, is looking for. Because when those groups are driving it, everybody else is saying, yeah, I want that too. So one of the things that's important to know, to identify or to embrace is, in order to create a strong culture, it means that we have to address bias amongst ourselves as leaders and our employees and team members and encourage that and support inclusivity. Now, here's the thing. There's a pushback in the US against that. And it's a narrative that's out there that is very misdirected. And this is something that is not new. It's not new. Inclusivity and embracing diversity is something that has been talked about for a long time. Whether we did it or not was a different story. There are many companies that did a really good job at doing that, but kind of half-heartedly really took the steps to really create it and have a real impact in that area. But in order to create a safe space, we have to address bias. We have to model the right behavior and conduct that is free of bias, that is totally inclusive. It has to be. There's no other way to create that culture. Otherwise, we have, which is really common, these little silos and cliques within organizations and teams that then they don't gel. So that's not really going to create a strong culture where people feel engaged and motivated to get behind the vision and to really create and do the work. Another way to build an engaged team, and really important to recruiting now, especially with these two groups, kind of Gen Z and millennials. They want to learn new skills. I own a training company. It's been very disheartening to see companies not making the investment in training their employees and really providing growth opportunities. A lot of companies do internal training on knowledge that employees need, or company information, or company SOPs and things like that, for sure. But really allowing employees to develop skills. And then that helps them take on new challenges. If they develop skills, they want to be able to take on new challenges, and then they also want to be given the opportunity to advance their careers. So I think the consensus a lot of times in businesses that don't train, or business owners that choose not to train, is they're afraid, I'm going to invest in this person and they're going to leave. I think we're focusing on the wrong thing. Best thing I ever heard was a dialogue between a CFO and a CEO. And the CFO said, what if we train them and they leave? And the CEO said, but what if we don't train them and they stay? Bing, 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 bing. I mean, it's pretty simple, right? And from my world, from my perspective, it's one of the things that I've had to kind of point out to people, this uncomfortable truth that, what are you doing? You're not even investing in your own team, culture, the vision for your company. How is that going to happen? How is that going to happen without the investment in them? So leaders who prioritize employee development provide opportunities for training, education, and that creates a more engaged and loyal team. And lastly, it's really important to prioritize work-life balance. Now, it's funny because work-life balance has come full circle. It used to be talked about 20 years ago, and then it was like, okay, let's not talk about that anymore. And after these couple of years with the pandemic, that is something that people have kind of reevaluated. And this 2 generations coming up, they want flexibility. They want work-life balance. And here's the thing, employees who feel, studies prove this, it's shown that employees who feel like they have a good work-life balance are 21% more likely to become engaged or feel engaged in their jobs. It's part of an employee engagement, which is so important. Having an engaged team, which is critical. So how can this be achieved? This can be achieved. Flexible schedules, remote work options, unlimited vacation time. I know a lot of you are going, what? Studies show, and it's been proven, that if you give people unlimited vacation time, they actually take less. Now, we want to encourage people to take a minimum amount of vacation time. I wholeheartedly believe that, because burnout doesn't create good work. But there's been this thing in the US here where we do not support that, and we kind of poo-poo people who take off. It's like a competitive edge. Let's see how long you can work without dropping. No, it is not something as a leader that you should be supporting. So, and one thing I'll share is early in my career, one of the first companies I worked for in New York City, they had this policy. And actually, it also was relative to vacation, but it was relative to sick time. Things have changed now. There's some laws that have had to dictate sick time, which is crazy. Here's the thing. They had it right, because you had 8 sick days, which is a lot in terms of what we create standard in the US, except for some companies who do PTO, which is paid time off, and they lump it together, sick, vacation, personal, however you want to use it. But back then, 8 days was a lot. But here was the thing. You could use all your 8 days, but if you ended up with 5 days left over at the end of the year, you'd get paid for them. So we certainly don't want, especially post-pandemic, people not using their sick time if they are sick. And that's one of the reasons why we've had to have legislation to dictate sick time, because people were coming to work sick all the time. That's a practice in this country that we definitely need to abandon. But it also creates the ability where people are like, okay, I have a benefit that maybe I don't want to just use all those days because they're there. And so that was one example early on that did create a different dynamic. In today's current trends, I think unlimited time is one of the things that should be looked at, because there's plenty of case studies about companies who've done that and they've seen their productivity go up. They've seen people not being burned out. They've seen people more engaged. And if you all know what it feels like, because I know I do, to endlessly be working without enough time off, doesn't create better work. And we certainly don't want that. And that's not going to create an engaged team. So in conclusion, building an engaged team requires focus on company culture, growth opportunities, and work-life balance. We have such an opportunity. These are not new concepts. But by implementing these strategies, leaders can create a team that is motivated to work towards a common goal and feels connected to the work that they're doing. That's how you create an engaged team. If you want to learn more about the Scale Factor Formula program, and particularly the deep dive into leadership within the Leadership Lab, go over to my website, www.mariadr.com, for more information. Go to the products tab and send me a message on what specific questions you have. There's a contact page there, or you can reach me on my Instagram page at the Maria DR. Send me a DM, and I'd be happy to give you more information or respond specifically to your questions. Thank you so much for joining me today. I am so happy that you sat with me today. I hope you have an amazing day. Stay tuned for the next episode of Finding the Upside, and stay tuned for more entrepreneurial goodness. See you next time, friends. Bye for now.